Hi and welcome back to Garden Ninja for the April tour. Now, to say that April has been a bonkers month weather-wise is an understatement. We've had a heat wave and then yesterday it started to throw it down. Today's really windy, but there's still plenty to be getting on with in the garden. So come on, let's get cracking. So things are really starting to come to life in the exploding atom garden, and it's felt like a really long winter. So I'm absolutely ecstatic that all of these herbaceous perennials are now coming back to life. You may remember I grew these chives from seed last year, and look at them now. They almost look like grasses, they're so big. And within these herbaceous borders, we've got a real mix of these soft pinks and purples that then lead us into that red hot centre of the exploding atom garden. But now is the time to get into your borders, grab your weeding tools and make sure that you keep on top of all those nasty weeds. Because if we leave it a few more weeks, what you may find is that you overrun and it can feel really disheartening. So if I can give you one top tip, it's to get out and do a couple of hours weeding now before the weeds really set seed. So one of the plants that failed was a cardoon, and I have about 8 throughout the exploding atom garden, and they're really structural. You get this huge artichoke style thistle flower that fires up into the sky, and they're a real architectural plant. But one of them got too wet, and originally they're from the Mediterranean, so they like kind of dry climates and full sun. So we've got the full sun, but it was just too wet. But anyway, I've got a few more, so I'm going to pop some more in. But rather than plant them where the old ones were, I'm going to change the position so that they get the best conditions, because I know that here is too damp, but further back at the border is far drier. So I'm going to play around a bit and see how they get on. So here we have one of the cardoons as it should look. So the cardoons take about 5 months before they flower. So this foliage started to emerge around January, believe it or not, and then slowly but surely it bulks up before we get to around June, July, and then the flower emerges and it's huge. And I always stake them because they get a bit heavy. But a few of them have died, so I'm going to plant some more, and I'll show you that now. So I'm going to plant the cardoon here. It's in front of this shrub, it's in full sun, but it's quite dry. So the other position where it sadly died was a little bit more moisture retentive. And I've learnt my lesson that these cardoons don't like that much moisture. So it is about trial and error, but that's the beauty of gardening, is that we're constantly learning and working out what plants suit what conditions. So it's really worthwhile doing your homework and then planting what you think is best. But if you fail, like I did last year with these, try again. And it goes without saying that you should always give your new plants a really good water. And especially in these warm conditions. So I'm going to thoroughly drench that. And then I'll probably come back every other day and give that a thorough watering again. Now it's a bit windy, but we're up at the wildflower meadow that I designed and planted last year. Now if you just look behind me, you'll probably say, Lee, it still just looks like paddock, like turf. And you'd be right. However, on closer inspection, I've now started to notice some of those beautiful herbaceous perennials popping up amongst the grass. And because we've mown it 3 times since it's been created, keeping the grass low just 3 times a year, these wildflowers now have the chance to rocket up and outcompete the grasses. So let's take a look at a few of the early contenders. So take a look down here and you'll notice that this is one of the Jacob's Ladder herbaceous perennials that I planted here in the wildflower meadow. And this is one of the earliest out of all of them. But as I look along, I can start to see smaller versions of this emerging. And the wildflower meadow this year is really going to come into its own. Now, I planted around 800 homegrown plants here last year. Now I know not all of them will germinate, so it really is about planting more than you need in a wildflower meadow, knowing that some of them might not survive or they may take a year or two to establish. But let's have a look at some other plants that are emerging. So let's have a look down here. Now you may mistake that for maybe a dock or a foxglove, but it's actually an innular helenium. It's going to be one of these really tall yellow flowers. But if you didn't know, you wouldn't know that was a wild flower. So in the meadow, it's about giving it time and patience to work out what's going to come up. So you really have to be patient. Then in the summer, these are going to fire up and create this amazing wildflower meadow. So it's still relatively early days with the wildflower meadow, but in a couple of months when these flowers really start to burst up, it should look incredible. All of the shrubs and trees that are put in are doing well, apart from the Scots pine, which unfortunately died over the winter. It was just too wet and it hadn't had time to establish. But whenever you're gardening, you need to bear in mind that there are going to be some failures along the way. And I've been going on bulk in this garden, planting more than I need, knowing that it's a really tough environment. However, once the meadow is established, it will pretty much look after itself. So make sure you check back next month to see how it progresses. So it's been a crazy dry April here in the UK, probably drier than I can remember. And as you look around, you'll notice that a lot of the beds are starting to crack and the soil looks really dry. Now you might be tempted to start digging to give that illusion of fresh, rich soil, but all you're going to do is dry out your beds. So I barely touch these. I'll be weeding them using either a hori or my oscillating hoe, just to get rid of the surface weeds. Everything else I'm going to leave. But what's important is that you water new plants. So anything in here that's only maybe a year old, I'm going to pay particular attention to water. Because in these dry spells, if they don't get the moisture they need now in spring, they're either going to die or be weakened and then not flower in summer. So focus your energy on new plants and plants that really look like they need a good drink, but leave the spade alone. Now fruit trees are a great tree for small and urban gardens, and the reason for that is that you can pick the rootstock. Now the rootstock is what the tree is grafted onto, so you take a scion from say an apple or a pear and then it's grafted onto a rootstock. That rootstock dictates the ultimate height and growth, meaning that you can pick really dwarf varieties which are fantastic for containers, balconies and small urban gardens. And I really would recommend that if you don't already have a fruit tree, please go out and get one. They're just wonderful for both wildlife, increasing privacy in the garden, and also providing delicious fruits. Now behind me you'll see these gorgeous blossoms on the fruit trees in my mini orchard. And someone asked me online recently why their apple tree has never fruited, and they've had it for 6 years. Now one of the reasons is that some fruit trees are self-fertile, which means that they will pollinate themselves, whereas others need another tree to pollinate. So if you've got a fruit tree that's not fruiting, it might be worthwhile trying to plant something like a crabapple or another fruit tree that is in blossom at the same time that can then cross-pollinate it. But if you're unsure, go onto Google and check out the specimen that you've got to see if it needs a pollinator. April's a great time to plant out bulbs that you may have had inside. Now this hyacinth was brought as a gift and it's in this trough, but as you can see, it's finished, it's looking really limp. Now some guides tell you to lift the bulbs, dry them off, save them, then plant them next autumn. But I find if I plant them straight away in the green, they survive far easier than trying to dry them, store them and all that rigmarole. So if you've got bulbs in a container that are finished inside, April's a great time to get them into the garden. So I'm going to plant these hyacinths in the granite garden, in the blue border, where everything's vivid and blue. And then hopefully next spring when they come back, they're going to give me that early colour and scent that is sometimes missing from parts of the garden. I'm going to show you how to plant them now. And I need to dig it so that the hyacinth is 3 times the depth of its bulb. And that's really important because that will stop it flopping over and looking really limp next spring. So I'm going to dig this hole with a trowel, roughly the same size as the bulb, but 3 times the depth. Tip these out of the pot carefully. You can see they're kind of all wedged in. We can reuse that pot and you can look at that, totally root bound. So what we're going to do is very carefully, hopefully, tease them apart so we can loosen all those roots. And just take your time, because if you damage the bulb, it's game over. So I'm going to give it a bit of a, there we go. Right, perfect. So pop those down, those can go elsewhere. This is the one bulb I'm going to plant in that hole. So you can see that that's the depth. I'm talking about 3 times the depth. The depth of the bulb, you want 1, 2, 3. So I know these are planted at the surface, which they tend to do for ornamental stuff, but in this case, I want to plant it 3 times as deep. There we go. And then I'll bury all those roots in there as well. Backfill, and then it just needs a really good water. And that foliage, you leave that there until it dies back. And then next year, it should come back. Now, hopefully these bulbs will come back, but compared to drying them and trying to store them, I think this is much easier. And if a few of them don't survive, well, the bulbs will rot down and simply provide more nutrients for the plants around it. So it really is win-win. That brings us neatly to the end of the April update. It's been a weird month with the weather. It's looking even weirder today with all this wind, but hopefully I've given you loads of hints and tips to help you make your gardens awesome. If you've liked this video, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications and tell your friends so we can spread the Garden Ninja community to help more people create awesome green spaces. I've been Garden Ninja. I'm off inside for a cup of coffee. Happy gardening.